Prohibition. Speak easy and have a drink. Prohibition was the nationwide ban of the manufacture, transport, and sale of alcohol. It was marked by the 18th Amendment that was ratified in 1919. However, it didn't begin nationwide until 1920. And by FDR's promotion of the Volstead Act, some alcohol and wine or liquor was legal and some were not. For religious purposes, wine was legal, but the private consumption and ownership of alcohol was illegal. Now, with Prohibition, there were two types of people. There were supporters and opposers. There were dries and there were wets. Might sound familiar for a dry or a wet county. Dries were supporters of Prohibition, and they blamed alcohol for the violence that affected American families. And doing that, they used weapons to destroy alcohol out of protest. They felt like they were the moral compass of America. They felt like they were keeping the values of the old world. And then you had the wets, the opposers of Prohibition. They found their ways to make their own liquor. This led to a rise in organized crime and the creation of speakeasies. So why Prohibition? The U.S. and alcohol had always had a contingent relationship. From the colonial period to the Whiskey Rebellion of 1791, the U.S. and alcohol had had a love-hate relationship. And in the 1820s and 30s, this would be no different, as a wave of religious revivalism would sweep the nation, and this would lead to an increased call for temperance. And as we can see, in 1838, Massachusetts would pass the first law by banning the sale of liquor in less than 15-gallon quantities. And only 8 years later, Maine would pass the first ever statewide prohibition law. And things would all change when the U.S. would enter World War I in 1917, as Congress prohibited the manufacture of liquor in order to aid the war effort. And this would step us straight into Prohibition. It wasn't all bad. It gave us speakeasies. And after Prohibition was put into effect, somebody had to drink. And where they had to drink? Oh, I'm glad you asked. Speakeasies. Speakeasies were created. A speakeasy was a saloon, a nightclub, or other place that sold alcohol illegally during Prohibition. Speakeasies were hidden in plain sight, and they became difficult, exclusive joints, available only to people that knew the right password. In cities that could boast thousands of speakeasies at a time, it was crucial to know how to get into one. Speakeasies could be a funeral parlor, a barber shop, a store. Heck, it could be your neighbor's house down the street. A speakeasy was only known to those that were close to the vest. One of our favorite examples of a speakeasy portrayed in film is in the movie Some Like It Hot, released by MGM Pictures in 1959. Here, you can see some bootleggers in an old hearse driving up to a speakeasy that is hidden in a funeral parlor. So let's say you and I wanted to go to a speakeasy. How would we get in? Simple. Specific passwords and knocks were one way to get in. And though they were suspect to change weekly, if not daily, they could be based on anything, from trivia or information or even the owner's favorite drink. And they were only known to the close confidants of the owner. But in some cases, dances or motions were used in place of a password, and even sometimes they would have armbands. Looked like much of a garter today, but back then, nobody could tell the difference. In this scene, you can see the only way people learned about the passwords was by word of mouth.
What's the password?
I come to Grandma's funeral. Here's your admission card.
Thanks, Charlie.
Now, if you want a ringside table, just tell them that you're one of the pallbearers.
Okay, Charlie.
Many speakeasies had doors that were hidden, often in plain sight. As can be seen in this Some Like It Hot scene, once you got through the barrier of the speakeasy, you left the world of Prohibition and you entered a party.
Well, if you gotta go, that's the way to do it.
Follow me.
Alas, the Budweisers and speakeasies of Prohibition wouldn't last forever. And on December 5th, 1933, with the passing of the 21st Amendment, Prohibition would be officially laid to rest. And let's face it, it had run its course. With the rise of organized crime and Al Capone, to Prohibition-influenced legislation, to the loss of vital tax revenue in the middle of a Great Depression, Prohibition had left some pretty bad unintended consequences. And we can even see implications today to Prohibition with the use of the dry and the wet county. A dry county being one in which one can't purchase alcohol, and a wet county being one in which one can purchase alcohol. Prohibition after 1933 would still shape our history.